We know from an early age that changing the rules in the middle of the game isn't allowed. The Code of Criminal Procedure adheres to the same concept, that the rules can't be changed during
criminal prosecution. Due course of law is basically the same concept as due process. It refers to procedural law. Procedural law is the process by which one is found guilty of a crime. The end goal of the Code of Criminal Procedure is that this procedural law be fair and consistent for all people. The Code of Criminal Procedure states, no citizen of the state shall be deprived of life. No citizen of the state shall be deprived of liberty. No citizen of the state shall be deprived of property. This includes your house and your possessions. No citizen of the state shall be deprived of privileges. No citizen of the state shall be disenfranchised. Disenfranchised means prevented from participating in the government. An example are Jim Crow laws that were passed in the 20th century designed to disenfranchise African Americans. None of these shall be taken away except by due course of law of the land. No one can be deprived of anything without due process of law. There must be a hearing, a trial, or a formal procedure for any of these things to be taken away. They can't be taken away arbitrarily. Finally, the formal procedure we use must be fair and consistent for all persons.
Guys, it's me again with a little update and request regarding this attack on the First Amendment in San Antonio, Texas. I'd like to organize a rally, a First Amendment rally, on the steps of the public safety headquarters downtown at San Antonio, with maybe a march to the city hall or municipal court where they are maliciously prosecuting people for insulting the police. I need a head count. Let me know if you're in. Let me know how much notice you need. Do you need a month's notice, a couple of weeks' notice? Will you attend? Let me know in the comments, and maybe we can put something together. We need your help, and we need your help now.
Put that shit back. Put it up. Walk 12.
Hey!
You're cool.
You can't do that to him!
What do you mean? Hang, I'm just recording.
Just because he's over here being a... You fucking pig! Just because he's my son, he's gonna take him in. What a pussy. What a pussy.
And I would just hope that our activists, that we all take a step back, take a deep breath. If you've got an issue with something was said, deal with it directly, but let's put away the broad brushes, because we know when we use broad brushes, we end up not building bridges, we end up not building relationships, we end up burning.
But briefly, I woke up one day with the idea that I'd been had. Everything that I'd been taught from earliest childhood, in school, in church, in family, everywhere, held no relation at all to the real world that I was facing in my early teens.
There must be some friction between your
friction.
environment.
There sure was.
And this
And
is
it
a
still
problem.
is.
But this is a problem.
Sure it's a problem, but whose problem? Mine or yours?
No,
I don't think it's mine, because I have spent the rest of that 25 years raising hell with society.
Of course, 25 years ago, you see, we had a different kind of society than we got today.
Not much.
We don't want to
Not
forget that.
much.
No,
Not much.
vastly
It hasn't
different.
changed much.
Well, I'd say this, the institutions that he's talking about haven't changed a great deal, and that makes it a problem.
Church hasn't changed a
The
bit.
church hasn't changed.
It has changed. It's gotten worse.
Community
Oh, yes, it's changed.
The false code of ethics hasn't changed.
You know what?
False code of ethics hasn't changed. The double standard has nothing has changed.
Schools haven't
Hell,
changed
nothing
to a
has
great
changed. It's
degree.
just intensified. Like it's been said, it has gotten worse and intensified.
Everybody who talks about this problem starts assessing blame. And that's what the church does. That's what everybody does. They want to categorize it and talk about how many of them are pregnant, how many of them are poor, whose fault is it? That's what everybody wants to know. Whose fault is it? Well, the answer to that is it's extremely complicated about whose fault it is.
However, when I am told that there are 3 psychologists in this community's school system to deal with 87,000 people, I'm disposed to assess some blame somewhere.
I ain't saying right.
And I think as the series goes on, Frankie's going to have to put the spotlight on these public officials. You're going to have to say to these public officials, look, why is this a problem, and what are you doing about it, and what have you been doing about it? And I think at that point, we begin to bear down editorially on the public officials. You're going to have to hit them with the hard, cold facts of the matter. Look, not only is the home and the church failing, but obviously, in many cases, the school system's failing. And the government is failing. And society and the community are failing. Now, what are you going to do about it as mayor? And are you really interested in what's going on?
Investigative journalism should be fearless. No question should be too tough to ask. No story too controversial. No subject matter out of bounds. Not only must we be fearless, though, when asking questions, but also when we uncover uncomfortable answers that shake and challenge our perception. Journalism should also be a guardian of liberty, in that a free people should have a free press. And finally, no constraints ever should be placed on a search for the truth. That is the definition, the soul of what investigative journalism should mean. And it's why I work so hard every day to restore what the founders called the Fourth Estate, the media acting as a watchdog, the grassroots fourth branch of government. So why do we need truth in media? Well, the very notion that we live in a time where this even needs to be asked is profound. If we don't have truth in media, I ask you this, what are we left with?
How you doing, sir?
Hello, Deputy.
Deputy Sanchez with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Notice you don't have a light on your license plate there.
Yeah, I'm well aware.
I think I pulled you over last time, not North Loop.
I still have the warning citation inside my binder.
Yes. All right, let me just get your information. Can I see your driver's license?
Yes, sir.
Where are you headed to right now?
I'm sorry, sir. I don't answer questions.
What's that?
I don't answer questions.
You don't answer questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Why is that?
I'm sorry, sir. I don't answer questions.
Vehicle under your name?
I'm sorry, sir. I don't answer questions. I have the registration document here if you'd like to see it.
Do you have your actual driver's license on you?
State law says I just have to exhibit, and that is a more than adequate copy of my license. Yes, sir.
We've already seen that the Code of Criminal Procedure gives a job description of sorts for magistrates. It does the same thing for peace officers. We'll discuss peace officers' general duties according to the Code of Criminal Procedure in this screencast. The first duty of a peace officer according to the Code of Criminal Procedure is to preserve the peace. Preserving the peace doesn't necessarily mean just breaking up fights. As you are probably aware, the mere presence of a peace officer affects people's behavior. In order to preserve the peace, the Code of Criminal Procedure requires peace officers to interfere, in other words, take action to prevent or suppress crime. A peace officer is also required to preserve the peace by executing all lawful court process. Court process includes serving warrants and legal writs such as evictions. Next, to give notice to some magistrate of all offenses. This means that a peace officer is required to take action or notify a magistrate of all offenses he or she comes across. This section must be interpreted carefully, though, since it doesn't take into account police discretion and the impracticality of a peace officer arresting every single person whom he or she comes across who has committed a crime. A strict interpretation of the statute would eliminate all police discretion and flood the already overloaded court system. The Code of Criminal Procedure continues to require peace officers to preserve the peace by arresting offenders without warrant, when appropriate, so they may be taken before a court and tried.
Where's Officer Mendoza?
Hey, sir, just get out of the roadway or I'm going to cite you, okay? For jaywalking. Do you hear me? Do you understand me, sir? You can't walk through like that unless it's a crosswalk. Do you understand that? I'm asking for your ID right now is because you're jaywalking. You can't cross the street like that unless it's a crosswalk. Do you have your ID with you? I'm asking for your ID right now. Are you understanding me? I need to positively identify you right now. Do you have your ID on you? Do you understand what I'm telling you? Or no? You jaywalk, that's illegal. I need your ID right now. Do you understand? Yes? Do you not understand? Can you step this way? Let's go. Step this way. I'm asking you to step this way.
Is that an order?
Huh? Yes, sir. Actually, the order is your ID right now because you jaywalk. That's illegal. You understand jaywalking? You need a crosswalk to cross from where you started right now, where you pulled over, to walk on this side. That's called jaywalking. Do you have your ID? I need your ID to properly identify. Let's go, sir. Let's go this way.
Why you grabbing my arm?
Because I'm asking you an order. You're not listening to me. Let's go.
So it's an ask or an order?
It's an order.
Oh, for jaywalking?
No. Jaywalking is illegal, and that's what you just did in front of us, in our presence. And I'm asking you for your ID, and you're failing to provide your ID. You understand that?
Well, I was just...
Let it go. Whoa. No, sir. I'm going to tell you right now. It's an order now. Put that down and give me your ID.
Where's Officer Mendoza?
Mendoza, he's not here today.
I got an axe to grind with him.
Okay, but if you can go ahead and just...
I'll stay right here. I'll stay right here.
Okay,
I'll stay right here.
my traffic stop, all right?
This is my traffic stop now.
It's not your traffic stop.
It's mine.
I need you to stay over there.
I need you to get to work.
As long as you don't interfere with my traffic stop,
This is my traffic stop. Get to work. This is my traffic stop. Get to work.
In this screencast, we'll discuss the Fourth Amendment and its protection from unreasonable searches and seizures. First, though, let's look at the historical context of the Fourth Amendment. Under English law, the saying was, if the constable blunders, the crook should not go free. In other words, if the police made a mistake, it shouldn't result in the charges being dismissed. Now, this was a problem because it encouraged the introduction of evidence as trustworthy when it wasn't. Whenever a police officer violated someone's rights, they could just say, whoops, I made a mistake, and the charges wouldn't be dismissed. So the Fourth Amendment tries to prevent this. It protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. It's important to note, all searches and seizures without a warrant are initially presumed to be unreasonable. Now, there are many types of searches without a warrant that the courts have recognized. Those will be discussed in Unit 7. So what is a search, and what is the purpose of a search? A search is considered a prying into hidden places. A search of a man's person, a house, or property. Searches are conducted in order to locate persons, contraband, not jail contraband, criminal contraband, fruits of a crime, and tools of a crime, such as a gun used in a bank robbery. The Founding Fathers recognized that sometimes searches and seizures would need to be conducted. They had to ensure only searches and seizures that were reasonable would be conducted, though. So in the Fourth Amendment, they created the requirement for a warrant and what it would have to contain. A warrant must first contain probable cause. Probable cause has been defined as facts and circumstances which would lead a reasonable person to believe a crime had been committed or a person had committed it. Warrants must identify what is to be seized, such as a person or an object, name or describe a person, place, or thing to be searched, and now this involves the who and the where. They must command a police officer to search. It's a magistrate's order. Therefore, it has to also be signed and dated by the magistrate.
My name's Andre.
Hi, Angel, man.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
Are you on Facebook? Oh, okay. You mind if I give you my number?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, give me your...
Yeah, I don't have a pen or nothing. Or maybe you could write it down. It's 915-781-4330. Yeah, 915-781-4330.
Do these all the time?
Yeah, I do these all the time, and I just wanted to show you some of my other videos. And
that's good, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm tired of them searching people when they're not supposed to be, because they go through everybody's cars, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Like just for traffic stop?
Just for a tail light or a license plate.
That's what I got pulled over.
Yeah.
You brought a canine.
Because they wanted to go through and that's why this camera's here. So.
Appreciate that, man. You did good.
Hey, no problem. And I'll talk to you later, man.
Hey, I'll let my people know. That way you can see your videos. I'll text you that way you can send me your face.
People, let me tell you, get your cameras, get your asses out in the street, start recording these public servants. They're the ones that need to be put back in place.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
El Paso police officer has been placed on desk duty after being captured in video pulling a gun on young children. We have it. You can see it for yourself. It shows the moment the officer pulls his gun and points it at these young children before putting it back in his holster. This unnamed officer is a 4-year veteran of the El Paso Police Department. We are told he was responding to a criminal trespass call at a recreation center, and a group of kids are heard yelling at the officer as he tried to arrest one of the little boys. The same officer is later seen in the video extending his nightstick toward the crowd, and he and another officer struggle to get the situation under control. So let's go straight to Martin Savage. He's been walking through this video and making some calls on this for us today. Give me some context and why this guy pulled his gun on these kids.
Well, that's still being investigated right now, and that's the key word. The investigation's underway. El Paso police have now assigned this officer to desk duty. It doesn't mean he's on administrative leave. He's still getting paid, but he's not out there on the streets. It's Thursday night when he shows up to that call of trespassing and runs into a group of young people there. What we don't know is that this video sort of picks up in the middle of something. Something has already happened, and that's not quite clear what exactly has happened, but that's why it appears these kids are all amped up. And they're shouting at the officer, they're shouting obscenities, they're clearly being disrespectful, but nonetheless, there is the officer pulling out his sidearm and pointing it at these children, which, of course, almost anyone would say that seems so totally inappropriate. And then on top of that is using the baton, not to strike anyone, no one's been injured, but obviously to gesture and try to bring control here. Backup eventually arrives on the scene. So all of this is being investigated right now. It's caught fire on social media. It's been shared viewed close to 5 million times on Facebook. Interestingly enough, Brooke, is the fact that people are kind of split on their reaction to it. Many people think what the officer did is inappropriate. Others, though, say that the children were completely out of hand. At one point, they say you can hear one of the parents also cursing at the police officer there. So this is just one of those moments that are being talked about. The investigation has not made any determination. They're looking at whether the pointing of the weapon violated any kind of protocol on the part of the El Paso police. Brooke?
Let us know what they find and the fate of this officer, Martin Savage.
City Council is getting an update on the status of body cameras for the El Paso Police Department. As we told you, city reps approved a measure in August to accept a $110,000 grant to pay for 25 body cameras. Today, the assistant police chief says there will be 34 cameras at a cost of $136,000. They'll go to officers with the department's crisis intervention team and DWI task force.
We've already done the field testing of the cameras. We've selected a model. We've gotten quotes, so therefore we're preparing the paperwork to submit to purchasing to actually make the purchase of the cameras.
Earlier this year, police told KTSN they expected to have policies for the cameras in place by the end of the year. Maloney says the goal is to eventually equip all EPPD officers with body cameras. Council.
Well, we've learned it's 25 cameras set to go on El Paso police officers. El Paso Police Chief Greg Allen himself making a rare appearance at City Council chambers.
El Paso city leaders all smiles accepting a $110,000 grant to fund the first body cameras for the El Paso police force. Cameras have been in use and at the center of high-profile cases all over the country for years now. El Paso is the only major city in Texas not currently using them. When asked why that is, El Paso's police chief Greg Allen had this to say.
I've never been resistant to cameras, but the thing is we haven't been able to afford it. And right now when you look at the department needing personnel and equipment, namely cars, and that became our priority.
As we've reported, the officers who were getting the cameras are with the DWI Task Force and Crisis Intervention Team. Allen says each camera costs between $400 to $500. He says the next move is to finalize a system of policies for the department, when to turn the cameras on and off. But the chief says to keep the cameras running long-term and to expand their use, it's going to take a lot more than this grant.
The problem with the cameras isn't so much the camera itself, it's the storage capability.
And the officers are expected to be trained and equipped with the cameras by the end of the year. At City Hall, Daniel Marin, News Channel 9.
Crawl towards me! Crawl towards me!
I don't believe anybody can realize the magnitude of the problem until they get into it. Like John said, there's a myriad of reasons.
Wish you'd stop being so good to me, Captain.
Get out of the car! And I will light you up! Get out! Now!
A 28-year-old was pulled over in Waller County for failing to signal a lane change, arrested for allegedly assaulting a state trooper, and was found hanging in a jail cell 3 days later. Senator John Whitmire, who's carrying the Senate companion to the bill, spent 2 days working to have it called for a vote. When that finally happened this afternoon, he told lawmakers more must be done to address mental health in county jails.
Today, if you don't remember one other word that I speak, I want you to remember this. When you deny someone their liberty, you have a responsibility to provide for the safety and welfare of that person.
I understand, sir. Give me a minute, we're about to take off, okay? ¿Está fría? Yeah, apenas, güey. Apenas la compró. La vi. No, pues I wasn't gonna check him, pero como vi que se regresó, like he was pacing back here. I'm like, yeah, that's not good. He's just pacing. Yeah. Hold. Requesting case number.
Last 3 and 035.
Copy. 10-6. ¿Se encuentra bien? Are you okay?
I'm good.
What are you doing? What's that? You're drinking your beer? You alright? Alright, do me a favor, go ahead and place the beer on the ground for me, okay? You're not in trouble, I'm just checking on you, okay? I see you pacing around back here. Alright, go ahead and have a seat over here. So what's going on? What are you doing? Just hanging out?
Hanging out.
All right. Do you have an ID with you? You don't have any type of ID with you? I'm sorry?
I can't get an ID every day.
Why not?
Hey, just do your traffic stop, dude, and get the fucking spotlight out of my face. Shut up. Just do your fucking traffic stop. I'm not interfering with nothing. I didn't say a word. I'm not interfering with nothing. Do your traffic stop. Hurry up. Get to work, man. Traffic stop. Go. Blah, 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 blah. Do your traffic stop. I'm not interfering with nothing. You're talking to me. Back away from me. Step back. Step back. Step back. Step back. Step back. Step back.
There's no problem with
all right. Well, the problem is you walking up to me. Back up. I need you to step away. I need you to step away. You're too close to me. Back up. Back up, dude. It's unsafe. This is just for my safety. Back up, please.
I'm asking you.
All I'm telling you is to back up.
You can record all you want. I don't care.
Back the fuck up, man.
Just go ahead and step back, okay?
I'll stand right here.
Sir, you keep standing here. I'm going to arrest you for interference.
I'm not interfering.
Yes, you are, sir.
I'm not. All right, here.
Take a few more steps.
No, I'm good right here. I'm not interfering.
Steps, okay?
You're the one walking towards me.
Get up to right here.
You're the one walking towards me. You're the one walking towards me. I'm good right here. There's nothing I'm doing.
A little bit.
How am I interfering with that?
I'm standing. You're fine.
All right, now I'm good, right?
You're good right there.
All right, now get the fucking work. Don't appreciate the light in my eyes. Fuck you.
Sir, this is my traffic scene. Just stay
Mine
away
now.
from me, okay? You can record all you want. Just stay away from my scene, okay?
I'll stay right here.
Yes, sir. No, park right there.
Sir, I need you to stay away from that vehicle. You can record from over there, okay?
I'll stand where I want.
Sir, I need you to stay away from
Get that fucking spotlight out of my face. Shut up.
Sir, you can record all you want, that's fine.
Hey, just do your traffic stop, dude, and get the fucking spotlight out of my face. Shut up. Just do your fucking traffic stop. I'm not interfering with nothing. I didn't say a word. I'm not interfering with nothing. Do your traffic stop. Hurry up. Get to work, man. Traffic stop. Go.
Sir, my partner...
Blah, 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 blah. Do your traffic stop. I'm not interfering with nothing. You're talking to me. Back away from me. Step back. Step back. Step back. Step back. Step back. Step back.
There's no problem with
all right. Well, the problem is you walking up to me. Back up. I need you to step away. I need you to step away. You're too close to me. Back up. Back up, dude. It's unsafe. This is just for my safety. Back up, please.
I'm asking you.
All I'm telling you is to back up.
You can record all you want. I don't care.
Back the fuck up, man.
Just go ahead and step back, okay?
I'll stand right here.
Sir, you keep standing here. I'm going to arrest you for interference.
I'm not interfering.
Yes, you are, sir.
I'm not. All right, here.
Take a few more steps.
No, I'm good right here. I'm not interfering.
Steps, okay?
You're the one walking towards me.
Get up to right here.
You're the one walking towards me. You're the one walking towards me. I'm good right here. There's nothing I'm doing.
A little bit.
How am I interfering with that?
I'm standing. You're fine.
All right, now I'm good, right?
You're good right there.
All right, now get the fucking work.
No, you're good to go. Sir, step back. Let him leave.
Let him go. And don't search his shit. Let him go.
Go ahead, sir. Go. Go.
Hey, fuck your mother.
Okay. Have a good night, sir.
Fuck you.
Drive safely, sir. It's cold outside. I don't want you to hit any black eyes for you.
Black eye from who? From you?
Take off, man.
Fuck you. Tell Officer Mendoza I said hello. Why do you keep doing that? Fuck you. Stop doing that. What's your problem? I'm still waiting for your black eye. You're the one escalating things with your spotlight. You can play all the games you want. Hey, what's your name and badge number? Officer? Officer, what's your name and badge number? I'm asking you a question. What's your name and badge number? Officer, can you hear me? Are you deaf? What's your name and badge number? You got a spotlight in my face for no reason. What's the problem? Seriously, why are you doing this? What's your problem? What is the deal? What is the purpose of doing that? Just to blind my camera for no reason? Why do you have a problem with cameras? You put on a uniform to serve the public. No, I'll stand right here.
No, sir, go ahead and turn
Back
around.
up, dude.
No, sir, go ahead and turn around for me, okay?
I didn't do nothing.
Sir, go ahead and turn around.
I didn't do nothing. Dude, what the fuck?
Recording police officers really came to the forefront in the early 90s with the Rodney King incident. And I think since then you've seen a lot more public discussion on the rights of people to film law enforcement. It's about transparency. It's about understanding what our public officials are doing, especially public officials who carry with them the ability to use force, including deadly force, to execute and enforce the law. The right of a person to film law enforcement has become less controversial as it has become more understood. And I think the ubiquity of video cameras in society today, where literally everything is filmed and thrown onto Facebook Live, has sort of illuminated this reality. There's been 5 or 6 different circuit courts of appeal decisions affecting more than 60% of the US population that have affirmed the right of individuals to film law enforcement in public while law enforcement officers are engaged in their official capacity as police officers. Most officers today understand that the public has a right to film police officers when they're engaged in their official capacity as an officer and they're in public. If you're lawfully recording a police officer in a public place and he or she tells you to stop recording, again, you're under no legal obligation to stop. The big source of contention seems to come is when people take that right and they infringe upon the officer's ability to safely execute their job. It's important to understand when a police officer tells you to move back or to get across the street, it's not necessarily because they're trying to stop you from recording them. It's because you're compromising their officer's safety or you're inhibiting their ability to perform their duty. When you cross that line, then while the act of filming may not in and of itself be illegal, you're engaging in other illegal activity which could lead to your arrest. It's hard to provide concrete guidelines to the public because everything's contextual. Every situation is different. So then it's always best to heed to the warnings of the officer. I think the goal of cameras, body-worn cameras, dash cams, or what have you, is not just to protect the citizenry, but it's also to protect law enforcement. Law enforcement officers who adopt body-worn cameras soon realize that those cameras are a lot more helpful to them than they are a hindrance. It's a good thing that law enforcement understands that transparency exists. It's good for the officers, it's good for the public.
Nowadays, it depends on your jurisdiction and where you're working. In New York City, if you reasonably expect that something you do on the street, especially if there's lights going and some action isn't being filmed, you're living in a bubble. In New York City, every single New York City cop assumes that they are being filmed 3 or 4 different ways during an incident.
All right, here's a question. While talking about these 3 levels and some of the things police officers are looking for, we've had the knock at the door, we've had the traffic stops and the roadblocks. What is something a citizen can look for when dealing with a police officer where you think, like, this is just something he doesn't like, and he's kind of hoping that I'm just going to give in and go along because he's a police officer? What is something that I, as a citizen, might notice? I'm filming, clearly the police officer doesn't like it. What is something that I would red flag a citizen, whether it's a traffic stop, knock at the door, or the filming, where you just know the guy doesn't want you doing it, but he's got to tolerate it, he just doesn't like it?
Well, I mean, it depends where you're filming. You don't want to come in the middle of whatever the cop is doing because then you're interfering. You walk off to the side or the sidewalk or a corner from a distance and you can film. You have the right to film.
Keep off the grass, though, means keep off the grass.
Correct. And don't interfere with what's ever happening there. If there's a fight going on, the police are trying to break up the fight. Don't come in and try and film the close-up shot of the last blow of the first guy. You have to stand off. I mean, it's being reasonable in your filming. As I said, different jurisdictions are understandably understand that this is going to happen. Not to mention all the surveillance cameras that are filming you as a cop in New York City and other jurisdictions.
Put that shit back. Put it up. Block 12. Hey! You're cool? You can't do that to him! Pussy ass! What is it? Hey, I'm just recording.
Just because he's over here being a...
You fucking bitch!
Just because he's my son, he's gonna take him in. What a pussy. What a pussy.
El Paso Police Department is now hiring. We're looking for outstanding men and women who are looking for a challenging and rewarding career in law enforcement. The El Paso Police Department is at the forefront of fighting crime. If you are looking to serve your community with endless career opportunities, great benefits, then we want to talk to you. For an El Paso police officer, it's not a duty, it's an honor that we are proud to dedicate and to serve.
Conference room. The chief will be conducting a press conference with regards to the findings of the incident at 6700 block of Zambrano earlier this year. We do want to let you all know that we are streaming this live on Facebook. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our police chief, Greg Allen.
Good morning, everyone. In response to the incident that occurred July 5th on the 6700 block of Zambrano, an investigation was conducted. The investigation was not anything generated from external sources, namely a complaining witness. This investigation took place because of media attention to the event and also due to the fact that it was videotaped by the people involved in the incident. The internal investigation consisted of a special disciplinary review board. To my left here is Lieutenant John Lanahan from the Internal Affairs Division, who was in charge of the actual investigation. We used extra resources to expedite this investigation to make sure it was done in a timely fashion. But even with that being done, the consequences of what we see were very timely. The membership of the board consisted of 13 members. One commander was on the board, 2 lieutenants. One of the lieutenants was from our training division, 1 sergeant, 1 detective, and a uniformed, non-uniformed member of our human resources division, a civilian. Citizens of the community were also involved. The discipline review board was chaired by an assistant chief on my staff. There were 4 additional civilian advisory board members that are in preparation for full membership, also in attendance at that meeting. The witnesses to this event were independent witnesses, 19. 9 were direct witnesses from the neighborhood, and there were officers also involved in the incident that were part of the investigation as well. The board heard from all parties involved, namely the witnesses from the neighborhood and the officers that responded to the scene. The board's findings were unanimous. The entire membership of the board, counting all the people involving sworn and civilians, were 13 members of the board. The board had unanimous decision on this. The actions of the officer, as far as pointing a gun at an individual or a group of individuals, was unfounded. He did point a weapon at a specific individual that he felt at that point in time presented a deadly threat to him. At that time, that is when he drew the weapon and reholstered as soon as he realized the threat wasn't imminent. The other finding was unfounded as far as the choking of the individual. Witness statements from the scene, from the individuals who weren't involved in the incident but participating as far as standing back watching the event transpire, did not find any officer at the scene choking any of the individual children at the time. The officer had prior knowledge of this neighborhood. Previously, there had been shots fired calls there. He had been sent there on that particular day for a criminal mischief call in progress. So the officer was on high alert, needless to say, as far as his safety and handling the call that he was dispatched to handle. With all that being taken into consideration, there is a standard of U.S. law from a Supreme Court judgment, Graham versus Connor, back in 1989, if my time is right on the finding of that, which allows officers to make judgments of the incidents at the scene at the time they are handling the event. That particular consideration was also a concern when we were hearing this case. And that is a big concern for the officer actually at the scene. The perceptions of what might be seen on video are of consequence, but they aren't the full consideration in the event that we're looking at here today. As I said before, the board found this particular incident exonerated overall, and I concur with those findings. And with that, I'll take some questions.
As a result of this incident, it was national headlines. Are you going to offer, is the police department going to offer any training for officers involving social media recording? We did see in the video that he was trying to take the phone away from the woman who was recording.
I don't believe that was his actions entirely. I don't agree with that particular statement. And officers do receive training on videotaping all the time. That is a First Amendment protection afforded by every individual. So officers know that is something that they cannot do because they're being videotaped. That's part of their job right now.
Can you clarify what's going to be happening with the officer that was involved?
The officer is back to work.
And as far as the children, have there been any charges on any of the other people involved?
Any charges? Mm-hmm. There have been charges filed by the Sheriff's Department in arresting some of the kids from that video because they are identified as being participants in some type of event where criminal actions were taking place over at a Scaredy Park. So that is pending with the courts if anything should happen any further.
But there are no charges in this specific case?
We did file charges against the adult juvenile who was 17 that was interfering. I don't know where that particularly stands right now. I understand the DA's office is taking that under consideration.
The perception for the police department might have changed in our community. Is there any message that you have?
Ma'am, would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, the perception for the police department as a result of this videotaping and this whole national outcry, is there any message that you have for the community in reference to the department itself?
Well, the video in a lot of people's minds are often revealing and factual as far as that being what actually occurred. But all the substance of the event have to be taken into consideration for a due process right that the officers afforded and to get it right as far as what actually happened at the time of the event. And so with all that in place, even though a small snippet of film may have portrayed the officer in a bad light, the totality of circumstances is what we have to go by to make this a fair process to both the individuals that the officer is dealing with and with the officer himself.
Is the actual internal affairs investigation report going to be released?
No, I'm afraid not at this particular time. I understand that the family has acquired an attorney. We don't know if that is for the criminal actions and or possible civil suit. And with the involvement of children being involved or people not of age, we have to keep that under wraps right now for the protection of the juveniles' identities.
Is the officer's name going to be released?
I'm sorry?
Is the officer's name going to be released?
Yes. His name is Joe Rios of Central Command.
Now, Officer Joe Rios, is he going to be assigned to that area again, or is he assigned to another area?
Exactly.
He'll be staying put in that area.
Yeah, the fact that he was involved in an incident that drew a lot of attention is no reason, in my opinion, and I know I'm right on that, not to take that person out of the community simply because there was an outrage at one point.
We want to thank you guys very much for your questions. We have a fact sheet that we'd like to give you at this time. And this concludes our press conference. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. I called it. What can I say? It's a sad time for El Paso and the citizens of El Paso. But it's not the only sad time. These kinds of situations have been going on for a very, very long time. As far as me personally, with how old I am, I can account for at least the past 20 years that I myself have observed the corruption of the El Paso Police Department. And I'm not talking about just the West Side, but I am talking about all departments. The Northeast, the East Side, every single one of them. All these motherfucking departments have corrupt ass pigs. And none of them have any so-called good pigs. I've seen them. I've come across them. I know what they're like. I know how they operate. Which is why I knew exactly how this outcome was going to turn out when it came to backing Blue ISIS. And it's fucked up, man, because there's so many El Pasoans out there that are blind to this kind of corruption and tyranny that when this press conference was finished with and everybody got to commenting on social media, once again, just comment after comment after comment supporting Blue ISIS, supporting the thin blue terrorist line. Like, it just baffles me how people don't understand. They refuse to see it. You know, it kills me. It kills me because when they do that, they enable these fucking corrupt ass pigs to be who they are. Because the collective people don't do anything about these bad pigs. Just like the so-called good pigs don't do nothing about the bad pigs. So it's like a virus. It just keeps growing and growing and growing and infecting every police pig that enters the force and continues to just spread and spread and spread, and it doesn't show any sign of slowing down. And it's not just El Paso, but it's the entire fucking country, man. So yeah, this is corruption at its finest right here. You know, and there's a lot more where that came from. I guarantee you that much, because again, I myself have personally experienced it. You know, and if me, just one individual, has experienced it, I know for damn sure that I'm not the only one. All right, there's plenty of more El Pasoans out there who have also experienced what it's like to be confronted by these criminals, this criminal mafia, this legal criminal entity that roams our city streets with guns and badges and weapons to use against us, with the monopoly on force. But it's just sad to say that the majority of El Pasoans just don't give a shit, you know? They take it up the ass and continue on their merry way. You know, as Ben Franklin said, those who are willing to give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And the majority of El Pasoans purchase that little temporary safety. So I'm going to go ahead and break this video down. I'm going to slice it up and talk about the key components of this video and let you know what I think about it, and hopefully you can see what I'm trying to point out to you here.
The board had unanimous decision on this. The actions of the officer as far as pointing a gun at an individual or a group of individuals was unfounded.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about here is the statement that you just heard Mr. Police Chief Pig here say. Now, I'm pretty baffled by this statement because, as you will hear in the next statement, it just does not make any sense. He like completely contradicts himself on this. So he said just now that the actions of the officer as far as pointing a gun at an individual or a group of individuals was unfounded. Like, to me, that specific language tends to speak in terms of that there was no findings of the officer pointing a gun at an individual or group of individuals. Okay, that's what that shit sounds like to me. But then right after that, just a split second later, he says he did point a gun at a specific person. Take a listen.
He did point a weapon at a specific individual that he felt at that point in time presented a deadly threat to him.
Okay, so it was unfounded by unanimous decision that the actions of the officer pointing a gun at an individual or group of individuals, but yet he just finished saying that the officer did point a gun at a specific person. What kind of shit is that? I mean, come on. Like, already this motherfucker's like contradicting himself. He's stepping on his own foot. He's not getting the facts straight. He's saying one thing and then he goes right after that to say something else. It's just like complete nonsense. So he then but he is admitting after the fact that the officer did pull a gun and point it at a specific person, okay? And then he goes on to say that he did it. Okay, now keep in mind that he is speaking for that pig, that criminal cop that pulled his gun out on the kids. He's speaking on his behalf officially, all right? And he's saying this as himself being the police chief pig to be true and factual. And he's speaking on behalf of the board in which their findings were supposedly unfounded of him pointing a gun at an individual or a group of individuals. But I'm going to show you something here because he then backs up the actions of the officer with it being imminent deadly threat. Those were his words, not mine, not anybody else's. Mr. Police Chief Pig here says beyond a reasonable doubt that it is factual that the pig pulled his gun out on a group of kids. Well, I'm calling it a group of kids, but he's specifically saying that it's a specific individual, but I'm going to show you what's up right now. But he's saying that the cop pulled out his weapon on a specific individual who posed an imminent deadly threat against him. Take a look at this footage. Okay, so be honest with yourself. Where's the imminent deadly threat? You need to see the footage again? All right, let's hit the replay. Check it out. So I ask again, where's the imminent deadly threat? We're not talking about the use of force. We're talking about the use of deadly force. And Chief Pig here is speaking on behalf officially of the pig who pulled out his weapon, on behalf of the board, and on behalf of himself. he is officially and factually stating, not saying, not as an opinion, but stating that that pig was in imminent fear for his life because he perceived these kids, these unarmed kids, to be a deadly threat. Okay? Now, if you haven't seen my video on the murder of Daniel Shaver, that motherfucker was, no disrespect, but that guy was crawling on his hands and knees crying. And the moment he made a second nature move to pull up his pants up because they were falling down, the cops were in imminent fear of their lives, of an imminent deadly threat, and they murdered him only to find out that he was completely unarmed. No gun was found on his person when they murdered that guy. The same thing with these kids here. This motherfucker pulled out his gun on a bunch of kids that would turn out to be unarmed. And imagine if he pulled the trigger. Holy shit. But okay, that's not the end of it. The fact here is this motherfucking pig, if you noticed him, he turned and looked to those kids for a good maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 seconds before he pulled out his gun and pointed at them. All right? When you're in imminent fear of your life over what the chief pig is officially stating, a deadly threat, a perception of a deadly threat, that means that you have every reason to believe that this motherfucker's running at you with full force, trying to kill you in some sort of fashion. Where do you see these kids posing an imminent deadly threat? Where do you see them pulling out a knife or a gun? What do you see these kids doing except utilizing their freedom of speech towards this pig officer who basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Who agitated these kids by his actions of choking the kid. He riled them up. That was his own fault. And these kids were utilizing their First Amendment to free speech towards this pig. And he turns around, he looks at him for 2, 3, 4 seconds, and he pulls out his gun and then wants to call it later on an imminent deadly threat. I tell you what, folks, if you or I did that in a real life scenario, we're going to prison. All right, we are going to be charged. We are going to be stripped away of our Second Amendment rights. They're going to take our fucking weapons away. They're going to stick us in a cage, and we are going down if we did what this fucking pig did. If I turn to my left and I look at that person and they're just standing there not doing nothing but yelling obscenities to me, and I pull out my gun, it's in the statutes. I cannot use force on a person who's just standing there yelling at me. You know what I'm saying? And that's the beauty of this. The pig is not talking about the kids just standing there yelling at him. He's not saying that as his official statement. He's saying the official reasonable suspicion was an imminent deadly threat to him. And that's why he pulled out his gun, because he perceived these kids to want to kill him, to want to cause serious bodily harm that will cause death. Where do you see these kids do that? All right. And last but not least, when I talked about group of kids versus him saying specific kid, he pointed his gun at a group of kids. When you're on the business end of a rifle, of a pistol, of a revolver, what have you, a gun, when you're on the business end of that and there's a group of individuals in close quarters to each other, you are basically sweeping all of those kids. You are sweeping all those individuals. You are pointing your gun at all those individuals. There's no such thing as having a tight group of individuals that are close to each other and pointing the gun at a specific person. Okay, if you want to get technical, yes, the barrel will be pointed straight at maybe one person. It's not going to you're not going to pull the trigger and the bullet's going to split in a bunch of different bullets and hit all three of them, simultaneously. But the fact of the matter is that bullets can change directions when they impact their targets. That bullet could go straight through the kid and hit the kid behind him. That bullet could hit bones inside the kid or tissue, and the bullet could actually ricochet inside him and exit out of, let's say it goes in his chest, it could exit out his neck and hit the guy the kid to his right side. All right. as long as you're pointing a gun in a direction that is not considered safe, and there's a bunch of people in that area, you are pointing your gun at that group of people. There's no such thing as just pointing it at one person when you got a whole fucking group of people standing there. So this is why I'm trying to, what I'm trying to clarify as far as how this pig is contradicting himself and distorting the facts, because not only is he saying that the findings were unfounded, and then goes on to say that he did pull his gun on a specific individual, but he's lying to people saying that he didn't pull out his gun at a group of kids. He pulled it on a specific individual, but all those kids were on the business end of his pistol. All right? That is an unsafe, I repeat, that is an unsafe direction to point your weapon at when you are not in fear of your life. This motherfucker was not in fear of his life. You can tell it in his voice. And then what does he say as soon as he pulls out his gun? Okay, I'm going to repeat it to you. Get back, motherfucker. All right? He was angry. He wasn't in fear of his life, especially after assessing the situation for 3. We're talking about a highly trained officer had 2, 3, 4 seconds to assess a situation where he has no targets advancing him. He completely ignores the target that's closest to him, and he's under a deadly threat perception, but fails to acknowledge the closest fucking threat to him and points it at the individuals that are actually talking shit. Why? Because he's angry that they're talking shit to him. This is absolutely an infactual, complete nonsense statement of this pig representing the El Paso Police Department, the words that are coming out of his mouth, that this was a perceivable deadly threat. And again, he's reiterating that stance on the fact that there were shots fired and he was on high alert because of the previous shots fired situation. Now, I don't know anything about that shots fired previous situation, but what I can tell you is, as highly trained officers of the law, motherfuckers are supposed to be on high alert at all times. You know, how is it that you're gonna sit there and be more of a badass because of some shit that happened over here, but you're gonna completely let your guard down because shit ain't happening over here, when shit can happen anywhere? All right? Just look at school shootings. I mean, school shootings can happen anywhere, you know? And there's plenty of fucking places out there where some shit happens and the people's response are, oh, well, this is a safe neighborhood, or this is a safe area. I never, ever thought that something like this would happen. I've lived here for 50, 80 years and nothing like this has ever happened the entire time that I've been here. You know, there's places where shit like that happens, all right? Crime is everywhere, and it can happen anywhere and everywhere. So it is completely stupid to sit there and try to back up his story saying that, oh, because of the previous shots fired, the cops were on high alert. Bullshit. They should be on high alert at all fucking times, because the moment that they put their guard down is the moment that they're going to be irresponsible towards the people that they're supposedly protecting and serving, because when some shit happens there where it doesn't happen and the cop has no reason to be on high alert, people are going to get hurt. Let's continue.
At that time, that is when he drew the weapon and reholstered as soon as he realized the threat wasn't imminent.
So what Chief Pig here is stating is that the only way his officer, and let's make that officers, because this involves the entire fucking El Paso PD, but specifically this officer, the only way that he can determine that he's not under deadly threat is by actually becoming the deadly threat and pulling out his gun. That's the only perceivable way that this pig can perceive that he's not under attack, that he's not under deadly threat by pulling out his penis and pointing it at a bunch of fucking innocent kids who are just utilizing their constitutional right to freedom of speech. Okay? Because what I want you to notice is that, again, this pig was staring at those kids for at least a good 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, what have you. And that basically is equivalent to the same amount of time that this pig had pulled out his gun from the time that he pulled it out to the time he reholstered it. It was virtually the same amount of time. But there is no comprehensible way that this pig, without pulling out his gun, in which he was staring at the kids for 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, there was absolutely no way he could have utilized that time to assess that he was not under attack. The only comprehensible way that this pig could determine that was by actually pulling out his gun and becoming the deadly threat and violating the rights of those around him. What kind of shit is that? How is that protecting and serving? You know, how are you such a highly trained officer, but the only way that you can perceive that you're not under imminent deadly threat by a bunch of fucking kids is by pulling out your fucking penis in anger, pointing it at them, and calling them motherfuckers? All right? Remember, these kids are private citizens. The cop is a public servant. The kids have every right to say whatever the fuck they want to that pig. But the pig himself, as determined by the core values and the mission statement that the El Paso Police Department have posted on their police department website, and I specifically believe it might be under the no, excuse me, I was going to say internal affairs, but no, it's on the actual police department website, like the homepage, if I'm not mistaken. But the core values state that the pig is supposed to be professional at all times. It is critical that his behavior on and off duty is to reflect the officer's reputation, and all this fucking bullshit and nonsense about, you know, establishing close-knit relationships with the communities and blah, blah, blah. Those fucking core values, just a bunch of fucking rhetoric to help them out and making themselves look good. But that's what I'm basically talking about here. This motherfucker, and as well as other pigs, because this sets the grounds for other pigs to follow in his footsteps, that the only way that they can possibly perceive that that there's no imminent deadly threat towards him is by pulling out their deadly weapons and then making that assessment. But oh no, forget about the fact that he had stared at the kids for the same amount of time that he actually had his weapon out. Forget that fact and just like sweep it under the rug. Like, that doesn't count. That doesn't matter. Let's continue.
The other finding was unfounded as far as the choking of the individual. Witness statements from the scene, from the individuals who weren't involved in the incident but participating as far as standing back watching the event transpire, did not find any officer at the scene choking any of the individual children at the time.
Here's a question for you. Can a person be arrested or punished for calling a police officer a four-letter word? In this screencast, we'll look at the court case of Duran versus the City of Douglas and how it applies to First Amendment rights. First off, let's take a look at some general concepts the courts have passed down about the First Amendment. First, speech is generally protected by the First Amendment, even if it is intended to interfere with the performance of an officer's duty. Next, there's no such legitimate concept as verbal interference. The only type of interference is physical interference. So here's the story. Douglas, Arizona is on the border. Police officers there were arresting a man when a second intoxicated individual started directing a series of expletives and obscene hand gestures at the officers. The officers detained and arrested that second man and his wife. Now note, they weren't arrested for drunken disorderly or public intoxication. They were arrested for what they had said to the police officers. That couple sued in federal court. During the proceedings, officers stated they didn't think detaining and arresting these people for their words was wrong. The district court ruled in favor of the plaintiff and the officers appealed. The appellate court held that mere boisterous conduct, although tasteless and crass, was alone insufficient to detain a person. The stop and detention of the plaintiffs were thus illegal. The court further reasoned that if the officers had intended retaliation, they were definitely in the wrong, since the speech made by those individuals was protected by the First Amendment. The court stated that government officials, especially police officers, may not exercise authority for personal motives in response to a real or perceived slight to their dignity. They said, quote, "No matter how peculiar, abrasive, unruly, or distasteful a person's conduct may be, it cannot justify a police stop unless it suggests that some specific crime has been or is about to be committed, or that there's an imminent danger to persons or property," end quote. In other words, mere verbal interference or harassment, calling of names, obscene gestures, that kind of stuff, without more, cannot justify an arrest or detention for something like resisting, delaying, or obstructing. The court ruled that only physical interference with the officer's duties may result in detention and arrest.
And I see the officer choking my son, and I'm like, what are you doing? So I got up in his face. I go, what you doing? You don't supposed to be doing that. They didn't see the beginning. They didn't see when they saw my son getting choked and then they tripped him and threw him on the floor. They didn't see that part. That's why the kids were agitated.
Age is important in criminal law. We do not consider children and younger teenagers to have the same knowledge, experience, and life lessons as adults, and legally rationalize they are therefore incapable of fully forming the mental states or intent required to commit a crime. In this screencast, we'll review what the Texas Penal Code sets forth in regards to using age as a defense. Historically speaking, under English common law, children under 7 years of age could not be convicted of crimes, and children between 7 and 14 only had limited responsibility for crimes. Today, age as a defense in Texas depends upon the precise age of the juvenile and the offense involved. The Texas Penal Code and the Texas Family Code set a bottom line standard by indicating no person younger than 10 years old may be charged as an adult for any criminal offense. In some cases, however, we may see fit to charge, try, and convict juveniles older than 10 but younger than 17 as adults. Examples may include particularly heinous crimes or when the juvenile has repeatedly demonstrated resistance or indifference to rehabilitation efforts in the juvenile system. In such an instance, the Penal Code sets limits on the age and offenses we can charge a juvenile with, and in all but a few cases, mandates a judge must be involved in making the decision whether or not to move them from juvenile to adult court. It's typically not automatic. First, the Texas Penal Code establishes a person younger than 15 may be prosecuted as an adult if the offense is perjury or aggravated perjury, when it appears by proof the person had sufficient discretion to understand the nature and obligation of their oath. Or, a person younger than 15 may be prosecuted as an adult for a fine-only traffic offense or fine-only ordinance violation. So a juvenile that is 10 years old or older can be prosecuted for perjury or aggravated perjury or for certain fine-only offenses. Next, the Penal Code states a juvenile who's older than 14 may be prosecuted as an adult if the offense is a capital felony or a lesser included offense of a capital felony, an aggravated controlled substance felony, or any felony of the first degree, as long as the juvenile court waives its jurisdiction and grants a motion to transfer the case to adult court. In other words, it's not automatic. Next, and in a similar way, the Penal Code states a juvenile younger than 17 and older than 10 may be charged as an adult with capital murder or murder, but again, only if the juvenile court waives jurisdiction and grants a motion to transfer the case to adult court. Finally, a juvenile who's older than 15 may be charged with any other adult criminal offense, again, as long as the juvenile court waives jurisdiction and grants a motion to transfer the case to adult court. Finally, the Penal Code states no person may receive the death penalty if the crime was committed when they were younger than 18. Also, No person may be convicted of a C misdemeanor when younger than 10. And finally, with the exception of a juvenile curfew ordinance, a person who is at least 10 but younger than 15 is presumed incapable of committing a C misdemeanor offense other than a traffic offense or violation of an ordinance unless the prosecutor proves by a preponderance of the evidence the defendant knew the conduct was wrong. Deadly conduct is a Texas Penal Code offense that isn't quite as well known as assault and aggravated assault. Certainly, you've probably never heard about it in the movies. The Penal Code states a person commits deadly conduct when they recklessly engage in conduct that places another in imminent danger of serious bodily injury. Deadly conduct is an A misdemeanor. There is one specific type of deadly conduct mentioned in the Penal Code that is graded as a felony, though. The Penal Code states a person who discharges a firearm at or in the direction of one or more individuals, a building, habitation, or a vehicle, and who is reckless as to whether or not it is occupied, has committed deadly conduct. So, for instance, a drive-by shooting where a house is shot up from the street, but miraculously no one is injured, is considered deadly conduct, and is graded as a felony of the third degree. A drive-by without victims is just one specific form of deadly conduct mentioned. Remember, any reckless conduct that places another in imminent danger of serious bodily injury is considered deadly conduct. The Penal Code concludes this law by stating that recklessness and danger are presumed, or they're automatic, if the actor knowingly pointed a firearm at or in the direction of another, whether or not the actor believed the firearm to be loaded. So if you unjustifiably point a firearm at another person, you have committed, at the minimum of course, the Penal Code offense of deadly conduct. The elements of an offense, or sometimes called the elements of a crime, are the building blocks for each criminal law in the Texas Penal Code. In other words, all elements of the offense within a statute must be met or satisfied in order for a crime to have been committed. The elements of an offense include the forbidden conduct. In other words, the act or omission that is prohibited, sometimes in Latin called the actus reus. Next, the required culpability. Culpability being your mental intent to commit a crime, sometimes called the mens rea in Latin and connected to one of the 4 culpable mental states in Texas. Next, the required result, which is otherwise known as the outcome. In Texas, either harm, bodily injury, serious bodily injury, or death. And finally, the negation of any exception to the offense. So, if the statute has any exceptions written into it, in other words, a statement to the effect of, this law doesn't apply in this specific situation, that exception must not apply or be negated in order for the elements of the offense to be considered satisfied and a crime to have been committed. As stated before, each element of the offense as written into the Penal Code statute must be satisfied in order for a crime to have been considered committed. There are a few exceptions to this, however. Some offenses are considered to be strict liability. In other words, it doesn't matter what your mental state or mens rea was. You are still considered to have committed the crime, even if you did not have any conscious intent to do so. An example of a strict liability offense is driving while intoxicated and other similar intoxication offenses. The Penal Code indicates no culpable mental state is required. Finally, it's also important to note that some criminal statutes don't specify a culpable mental state when you read them. Even though it's not written into the statute, the Penal Code states early on that if a culpable mental state isn't listed, then the reader is to assume the culpable mental states of intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly apply.
En lo personal apoyo al policía.
I personally am on the side of the law because the video shows they were disrespecting the cop.
The officer had prior knowledge of this neighborhood. Previously, there had been shots fired calls there. He had been sent there on that particular day for a criminal mischief call in progress. So the officer was on high alert, needless to say, as far as his safety and handling the call that he was dispatched to handle. being taken into consideration, there is a standard of U.S. law from a Supreme Court judgment, Graham versus Connor, back in 1989, if my time is right on the finding of that, which allows officers to make judgments of the incidents at the scene at the time they are handling the event. That particular consideration was also a concern when we were hearing this case. And that is a big concern for the officer actually at the scene. The perceptions of what might be seen on video are of consequence, but they aren't the full consideration in the event that we're looking at here today.
Although officials say they don't approve of the kid's behavior, they understand the need for proper protocol. It has yet to be determined if the officer was following it.
As I said before, the board found this particular incident exonerated overall, and I concur with those findings. And with that, I'll take some questions.
As a result of this incident, it was national headlines. Are you going to offer, is the police department going to offer any training for officers involving social media recording? We did see in the video that he was trying to take the phone away from the woman who was recording.
I don't believe that was his actions entirely. I don't agree with that particular statement. And officers do receive training on videotaping all the time. That is a First Amendment protection afforded by every individual. So officers know that is something that they cannot do because they're being videotaped. That's part of their job right now.
All right, please stay. That is a First Amendment protection afforded by every individual. So officers know that is something that they cannot do because they're being videotaped. That's part of their job right now. That is a First Amendment protection afforded by every individual. So officers know that is something that they cannot do because they're being videotaped. That's part of their job right now.
Can you clarify what's going to be happening with the officer that was involved?
The officer is back to work.
And as far as the children, have there been any charges on any of the other people involved?
Any charges? There have been charges filed by the Sheriff's Department in arresting some of the kids from that video because they are identified as being participants in some type of event where criminal actions were taking place over at a Scaredy Park. So that is pending with the courts if anything should happen any further.
But there are no charges in this specific case.
We did file charges against the adult juvenile who was 17 that was interfering. I don't know where that particularly stands right now. I understand the DA's office is taking that under consideration.
The perception for the police department might have changed in our community. Is there any message
I'm
that
sorry,
you have?
ma'am, would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, the perception for the police department as a result of this videotaping and this whole national outcry, is there any message that you have for the community in reference to the department itself?
Well, the video in a lot of people's minds are often revealing and factual as far as that being what actually occurred. But all the substance of the event have to be taken into consideration for a due process right that the officers afforded and to get it right as far as what actually happened at the time of the event. And so with all that in place, even though a small snippet of film may have portrayed the officer in a bad light, the totality of circumstances is what we have to go by to make this a fair process to both the individuals that the officer is dealing with and with the officer himself.
Is the actual internal affairs investigation report going to be released?
No, I'm afraid not at this particular time. I understand that the family has acquired an attorney. We don't know if that is for criminal actions and or possible civil suit. And with the involvement of children being involved or people not of age, we have to keep that under wraps right now for the protection of the juveniles' identities.
Is the officer's name going to be released?
I'm sorry?
Is the officer's name going to be released?
Yes. His name is Joe Rios of Central Command.
Now, Officer Joe Rios, is he going to be assigned to that area again, or is he assigned to another area?
Exactly.
He'll be staying put in that area.
Yeah, the fact that he was involved in an incident that drew a lot of attention is no reason, in my opinion, and I know I'm right on that, not to take that person out of the community simply because there was an outrage at one point.
We want to thank you guys very much for your questions. We have a fact sheet that we'd like to give you at this time. And this concludes our press conference. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Killed yesterday when Bexar County Sheriff's deputies opened fire on a burglary suspect. 6-year-old Cameron Prescott was hit with a stray bullet. The sheriff says the woman that they were chasing broke into Prescott's home and threatened the family in order to steal her car. The 4 deputies confronted her on the porch and began shooting and killed the suspect. One of the rounds pierced through the mobile home, hitting and killing Cameron. Deputies say the suspect had no connection to the little boy's family. KXAN's Lauren Landman is in Schertz this evening. Lauren, has there been a lot of activity out there that you've seen today?
Sydney, I've seen dozens of investigators going in and out of the Pecan Grove neighborhood all morning and afternoon. Law enforcement says although the woman had a gun when they started chasing her, when she was shot and killed, there was no weapon to be found.
The civilian witnesses report that they could hear her physically threaten to shoot the people that were outside. Again, we know them to be the deputies that were making contact with her. We found a tubular object underneath that deck that had the suspect's blood on it, but additionally mud. And we believe now that that object was very well what the deputies saw, also what the civilian witnesses saw, and all of them perceived to be a weapon of some sort.
While I've been out here, a lot of sheriff deputies have been gathering and walking through the trees just outside of the neighborhood, and a DPS helicopter has been flying above, I'm assuming searching for a weapon. This morning, we got our first close look at the scene where crews were cleaning up. Toys are still in the yard, and through the shattered glass door, you can see a Christmas tree lit and people outside scrubbing the front porch. The school district where the little boy attended is also grieving the loss. This afternoon, they released a statement describing Cameron as a kind-hearted little boy who was a ball of energy. His first grade teacher says he had a great sense of humor and a caring heart. He'll be truly missed by his classmates, teachers, and staff. A fund has been created to help pay for Cameron's funeral. You can drop off all your donations at the Schertz Bank and Trust branches, or you can donate by sending it through the mail. You find out all of that information on our website, KXAN.com.